I just watched Blue Beetle. Is it any good? How many butter pumps will it get? Let's find out.
My baby likes butter.
Hey butter babies, how y'all doing? So, let's talk about Blue Beetle, but before we jump in it, let's talk about how desperately DC needs a win. DC has had a string of back-to-back flops for the better part of a year now, starting with Black Adam back in October of last year. That was followed up this year by Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and The Flash. All three of those movies varied in terms of quality, and none of those three movies have set the box office on fire. Some news outlets have Black Adam losing anywhere between 50 and 100 million for the studio. Fury of the Gods made $133.5 million from a $125 million budget, and that's 133 million worldwide. So, you know. And then there's The Flash. The Flash ended its run with the 300 million worldwide box office total, making it the most disastrous run yet for a major DC movie blockbuster release. The Flash is estimated to have cost Warner Brothers Discovery over $200 million to make and market. Some news outlets say that number is even higher, like closer to 300 million. With an estimated finish line of $650 million just for it to turn a profit for the studio. It's said in the end that The Flash will end up costing Warner Brothers Discovery around $200 million. So needless to say, DC needs a win, a big win. But it may not get it with the Blue Beetle. This past weekend saw Blue Beetle wrestle the #1 spot away from Barbie. We'll take that W, thank you very much. But it's a lowercase W. It only grossed about $25 million domestically and only about $43 million worldwide. And it appears to be front-loaded. Most movies see a bump in attendance on opening weekend between Friday and Saturday. Blue Beetle, however, dipped in attendance, bringing in 8.5 million on Saturday as opposed to the 10 million it brought in the night before. So it's definitely front-loaded. And while Blue Beetle cost a fraction of what other superhero movies cost, it's said to have cost about $120 million before advertising. With opening numbers like this, it really does have an uphill battle ahead of it. The real test will happen next weekend. How much of a sophomore slump will it have? We'll know at the end of this weekend if it has any legs and if it will turn a profit in theaters. Let's hope. But is it any good? Actually, yes. Yes, it is. And no one is more surprised than me. When I went to see it, its Rotten Tomatoes score was hovering around 81, 82%. Well, currently it's at like 76% with an audience score of 92%. All good news, but I remember the trailers which made this movie, which was supposed to be released exclusively on Max as a streaming movie, look very mid. So I had two very different perceptions of the movie playing in my head when I went to see it, making me at best cautiously optimistic this movie would turn out decent. And it was. Much like the two Shazam movies, this movie finds its heart in its family dynamics. This movie is all about family, honey, and that really works in its favor because honestly, the family surrounding Jaime Reyes not only hold him up, but they actually hold this entire movie up. Without Jaime Reyes' family, Blue Beetle would have been a very mid movie. Jaime Reyes' family is very tight-knit. The love they have for each other is palatable. And the way they have each other's backs, not just when the third act comes around and when the action kicks up a billion notches, but throughout this entire movie, they have each other's backs. This family is truly ride or die for each other. And that feeling of family first comes through more than a few times throughout the entire movie. It's truly what holds this film together. Without it, this movie would have been very mid. The action scenes are passable, although they look a lot better on the big screen than they did in the trailers. But they don't show us anything we haven't seen before in superhero movies with bigger budgets. That Blue Beetle was originally intended as a streaming movie comes through in its CGI. That's not to say the CGI is terrible. This ain't The Flash after all. But it's very comparable to the first Shazam movie, which also cost around $120 million to make. So if you remember how the special effects came through in the first Shazam movie, you'll have a pretty good idea how they look in this movie. Again, not terrible, but not jaw-droppingly amazing either. So what's this movie about? Well, to be honest, the trailers pretty much gave the plot of this movie completely away. That's not to say if you've seen the trailers, you've seen the movie. But the trailers do a really good job of laying out the main points of this movie. There are zero surprises. So going forward, there may be mild spoilers here and there, but not so many that it would destroy your enjoyment of this film. Like a lot of superhero origin stories, this one occurs as an accident. Wrong place, wrong time kind of scenario. The Blue Beetle is actually an alien scarab that crash lands to Earth. Cut to a few twists and turns later, and the scarab, which happens to be sentient, attaches itself to Jaime. Again, that much is seen in the trailer. However, the movie itself expands on the body horror of it all, which was really interesting to see. The director, Angel Manuel Soto, did a really good job not only putting the audience right in the middle of Jaime's transformation, but allowing us to experience with Jaime and his family the extreme horror that takes place in that moment. So now that the scarab has attached itself to Jaime, Cord Industries, the private company that was looking to exploit the scarab for its own military uses, has come to collect it. And in true corporate villainy fashion, the head of Cord Industries will do whatever it takes to rip it off Jamie's back, including killing him, his family, or both. Again, you saw all of that in the trailer. The scarab has a mind of its own. Sometimes it does what Jaime wants it to do, other times it doesn't. However, one of its main directives is to keep its host alive. So, regardless of whether it's listening to Jaime or doing its own thing, protecting Jaime is its #1 job. To do that, it slowly but surely connects itself to all of Jaime's bodily functions, all the way down to eventually his DNA strands. Soon, there is no dividing line physically between the scarab and Jaime. This means, in addition to the Iron Man-like qualities Jaime now possesses, a comparison I absolutely hate making because it's not fair to the Blue Beetle character, but unfortunately it's the comparison that fits the most. Jaime develops super healing powers and the ability to create most any weapon he chooses. This, of course, comes in handy when he fights the big bad in Act 3. Speaking of the big bad, let's talk about Susan Sarandon. She plays the big corporate baddie, Victoria Cord, in this movie. Quite honestly, I'm not sure why she's even in this movie. Maybe the studio determined they needed an A-list star to put butts into seats, but even with that reasoning, I'm not sure why she said yes to this. I mean, she's not necessarily bad in this movie, but she's definitely not giving it her all. It feels like she's phoning it in throughout the entire movie. There was nothing about her performance that made Victoria Cord her own. She gives the character a very plug and play quality that makes it feel like anybody could have stepped into the role. And because it's Susan Sarandon, we all know she can bring it to any role she takes on. She just chose not to in this role, which is sad. Victoria Cord could have been so much more than what she made her. And you know what? I'm going to go so far as to even say outside of the bad guy Jaime actually physically fights, Susan Sarandon is the weakest link in this entire movie. So who's the strongest link? The Reyes family, of course, led by the always hilarious George Lopez as Crazy Uncle Rudy. This family is the best. As I said before, family takes front and center in this movie. This family loves each other, and they are down for each other in a way a lot of other families can only aspire to be. They are each other's biggest cheerleaders, and when push comes to shove, Nana Reyes leads the charge, lighting up motherfuckers like Christmas trees along the way. This family is delicious, like Thanksgiving dinner. All the rest of the superhero stuff is honestly just the dessert, the cherry on top. Blue Beetle is at its best when the family is in the mix. I appreciated the smaller stakes in this movie. Much like the first Shazam movie, the stakes in Blue Beetle are not earth-shattering. Nobody's trying to conquer the world. This is very much a personal movie. And because family is such a strong motivating force in this film, I actually wouldn't mind seeing the sequel have around the same stakes, only maybe involving the community and neighborhood more. That's alluded to in the closing moments of the film when the entire neighborhood shows up to mourn with the family and help them rebuild their home. Yes, there are real stakes in there that I will not spoil, but real stakes. So maybe the sequel can include not only the Reyes family, but the rest of the neighborhood as well. One of the major plot lines of the movie is the gentrification of Jaime's neighborhood. Black and brown people are being pushed out by Cord Industries to make room for newer and shinier and higher priced homes. Although by the end of the movie that threat is eliminated through the defeat of Victoria Cord, it doesn't necessarily mean the very real threat of gentrification can't be revisited on the neighborhood by another corporate baddie. LexCorp maybe? What will definitely happen is a search for Ted Cord. In Blue Beetle lore, Ted Cord is actually the second Blue Beetle, and Jaime is the third. The reason Victoria Cord is in charge of Cord Industries is because her brother has gone missing. No one knows where he is. Well, in the mid-credits scene, we find out Ted Cord is actually alive. We hear his voice through a statically radio line saying he's alive and he's trying to get back home. So if Blue Beetle proves profitable, the jury is still out on that one, we'll see. The search for Ted Cord will definitely be the storyline going forward. But here's hoping it'll tie to the neighborhood and community as well. And speaking of mid-credit scenes, real quickly, there are two end credit scenes. One is a mid-credit scene, the second is an end credit scene. Do not stick around for the second end credit scene because it's not worth it. The mid-credit scene gives you everything that you need. The end credit scene is a non sequitur. So as soon as the I'm still alive and I'm trying to get home scene is all over, pick up your popcorn and head for the door, because the end credit scene, not necessary. So how many bumps, how many butter pumps am I going to give Blue Beetle? 3. That's right, 3 butter pumps. It is truly a mid-movie that is saved by a strong and tight-knit Mexican family. That kind of representation gives this movie a slightly better than mid 3 butter pumps. Go out and support this movie. DC needs this win. It's a fun time at the theater. You won't regret going to see this movie. So now I turn it over to you, my beautiful butter babies. Have you seen Blue Beetle yet? If so, what did you think? How many butter pumps would you give it? Sound off down below. I want to hear all about it. Thank you so much for watching, commenting, and subscribing, butter babies. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.